It's the week of March 8th, 2022, and this is Remember 64. You've now entered level 2 of Remember 64. Well, I'll be kicking things off with my first guest as we talk all about the N64 console and a whole lot about collecting retro video games overall. It's an interest and hobby I've only recently started again, but friend of the show Bill from the Gaming and Collecting podcast has been doing it for years. So I thought I'd get him on and pick his brain about the nerdy obsession that we have, and also try to find out if he has any cool tips as collectors continue to search for secret deals while scouring the internet or in local shops. Without further ado, here's our really fun discussion.
Stage 2, multiple interactive 3D environments. Stage 3, intra-squadron dogfighting. Stage 4, sub-jolt rumble pack impact control sensor.
Introducing Star Fox 64 with Rumble Pack, only for Nintendo 64.
Conclusion, stimulus overload. Good game.
So my first guest on this podcast, I am honored. It is a privilege to have Bill from the Gaming and Collecting podcast with me. Bill, I will get into exactly why I wanted you in particular on this episode, because as by the title of your podcast, it is about gaming and collecting, and there's a whole lot to talk about there. So that's what we're going to get into. But Bill, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Tell everybody a little bit about your podcast.
So the Gaming and Collecting podcast, it was originally started with, so me and my sister, we're very close in age, and we grew up mostly together for our childhood. She currently lives in a different state than I do, and we wanted to be able to stay in touch, like probably about as much as we could, considering the distance. So she had been hounding me to start a podcast because I talk so much about gaming and stuff all the time. And so we finally decided, okay, let's do that. And she wanted to be the co-host, and I was like, sure, we can do this. This will be how we keep in touch. So we started the podcast, and initially, so I also run a gaming blog on Instagram called the Barber Who Games. No, I don't actually cut hair. That's people have actually asked me that before. But
fair question, I guess. Fair question.
Yeah. But so I run that, and I always share my gaming collection. So the whole idea originally was it was going to be a podcast about gaming and collecting, and we kind of lost the plot with the name real fast, because we kind of went from being gaming to most of the time we just talk about anime or nerd culture, and it's actually kind of become more of a nostalgia based podcast and like childhood memories podcast. But the collecting is something that I'm trying to like slowly like actually like make a point of in future episodes, and that's basically
awesome.
The gist of it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, and I think that's the way a lot of the sort of, I guess you could call them indie podcasts, like this one, like my other one, which is back in my day, like all of those, they sort of evolve as they go. You know, you might go back to what the original idea was here and there, but things aren't stale, at least. I guess that's part of it, but evolution is not a bad thing. So that's interesting. It's cool that you have a lot that you can cover. And to me, I find it very interesting to listen to two siblings talk about it, because, and because, like you said, you're pretty close in age, you have this shared experience growing up, and I think that brings a lot to it as well. So, so I would say anyone who's looking to listen, that to me is a really big high point when I listen to your episodes, for sure.
Thank you.
So we'll get to the collecting in just a sec, but because we are on Remember 64, we are talking at least a little bit about the Nintendo 64 and everything it had to offer or not offer, and all its complications along the way. Now, you and Alex did an episode on the Nintendo 64 a few months back. I believe it was in late 2021, so people can find that episode there. And it was very entertaining because there was a lot of mixed thoughts and feelings about the console. So let's talk about your memory, your experience, and if you had any of that shared memory and experience with your sister as well, because I'm very interested to hear what everyone has to say when they come on the show about what they feel about the Nintendo 64 overall.
So it's pretty interesting. So that episode of our podcast, I actually had titled it "Nostalgia Makes a Difference" because me and Alex, we didn't actually grow up with the N64. We were PlayStation kids. What was funny was, it's weird because the PlayStation sold considerably more than the N64. Like it was like one of those, like, it was not even close kind of things.
Yeah, and it had a year and a half, 2 years extra, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So it was around for even longer. Yeah.
But what was funny was, usually it was like PlayStations or whatever, but for some reason in the area we grew up, everybody had an N64, and we were like the one like weird people with like a PlayStation.
Somehow the PlayStation was weird.
Yeah, well, it was funny because like I'd be in like, so I was still in like kindergarten, like first grade around that point.
Okay.
And all the kids would be talking about Mario, Zelda, Smash Brothers, and I'm over here going like, got Crash Bandicoot, got Final Fantasy VIII. It's like
nothing to forget about. That's for sure.
No,
so.
But everyone's looking at us like, what the hell are those?
Yeah, right. Sure, fair enough.
Because I talk about all these RPGs, and everyone on the N64 is like, what's an RPG?
Yeah, well, you know what? And I would have been one of those people because I had the N64, and sure, there's RPGs, but it's not the same, especially not compared to something like Final Fantasy, 7, 8, 9, like, all those ones that came out for the original PlayStation. I mean, those are icons on their own, right? Regardless of what console they came out on. So,
but I guess in a roundabout way though, because I was surrounded by people who had N64s for years, the N64 was like that one console that is like I wanted to play because I want to know what I was missing. Because it was like everybody hyped this thing up, and I remember going to the store and seeing the controller and being like, I was just trying to grasp it because when I first saw it, I'm like, why does it have 3 of these? I don't get it. I'm trying to process this.
Where's the other joystick?
Yeah. Like, I didn't get it, but at the same time, I was like intrigued by it. And I'd see like the demo for Mario 64, and I'd be like, that looks amazing. Yeah. But as I said, it was kind of one of those things where it's like I just missed it at the time, but I was always intrigued by it.
Right. So what's are there any particular games that stand out? Like I think for a lot of people, the N64 is a communal experience. It's Mario Party, it's Smash Brothers, it's Mario Kart. Like that's probably, I would say, especially if you didn't own it. So I assume that's where it would go, or what's generally your experience with it as far as any particular games that stand out for you?
So actually, believe it or not, the first N64 game I ever played was Star Fox 64.
Nice.
Because I was like intrigued, because that's still when voice acting was such like a new thing in games, especially on the N64, like full voice acting, and just seeing that. I mean, it's cheesy as hell like nowadays, but playing that and then like the whole like trying to figure out the controls, the whole action. I was terrible at it as a kid, but that game is like one of probably the best looking games on the system, arguably.
It actually is really great. I mean, there's so much happening on screen all the time, right? I think that brings a lot to it. And you point out the voice acting, man. I pulled it up. I want to say about a couple weeks ago, and I haven't played it in years. And I was like, man, you know what? Yeah, the voice acting stands out. The sort of story building between the characters as they're talking, like you could say whatever you want about Slippy being annoying and all that, but it still brings something to the experience. So that's a good point. I didn't really notice it until I turned it on a couple weeks ago, and then you pointed it out, and I go, oh yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So
and it's such clear acting too. Like it doesn't sound like scratchy like a lot of games at that time did.
Yeah, you're right. It's an advancement definitely from the consoles that came before it. So, so overall, did you feel like the N64 is something? I mean, you've played it since then, and you and your sister talked about a decent amount because you picked up a few games in that episode, and you guys played some games. How do you think that it has progressed, or how do you think it has aged or not aged over the last 25 years?
So, honestly, like from a gameplay perspective, all the games are still just as good as they were back in the day. Like I had no issues like picking up like Mario 64. I actually played first on the DS, believe it or not.
Oh, nice.
But going back to the original version, like it's like night and day. That game plays so well nowadays. Discovering all the rare classics like Banjo-Kazooie, Conquer.
Yeah.
Discovering Conquer was even a thing was pretty mind blowing at the time. Like, we'll get into it later. My story about how I went and how I acquired Conquer. But
Yes, please.
there was that one. There was racing games. F-Zero like still amazes me how smooth that game is, like, and how fast it is.
I got to replay it. That's one of the ones for N64 at the time that I played very little of, and that's what I'm really interested to dive back into, because I played a lot of the Super Nintendo one because I had that game. I had that cartridge, but for some reason the N64 one, even though I had the console, I knew I liked the original. I sort of, I think one of my friends had it, and so many people had N64s, but only one copy of that game was sort of in my bubble, I guess, at the time. So that's interesting. I gotta replay that one for sure.
Yeah, and then I'm trying to think of and then one of my favorite hidden gems on the N64. It was actually one of like the first games I tracked down for it. It's one of the more obscure games. It's called Rocket Robot on Wheels.
Yes, that is a game that I have on my looking for list that I want to collect, and it is made by who's the developer?
Sucker Punch.
Sucker Punch. That is one of the reasons why I found it.
That's why I wanted to play it, because I'm a huge Sony guy. I love Sly Cooper. And I was I was doing history on the company, and I found they made an N64 game, and I tracked it down. It is such a solid platformer. Like,
is it really? Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
It has like realistic because he's a robot on wheels, so it actually has like a realistic physics system for the time. So smooth controls, and you can make like roller coasters in it because it's in a theme park.
Man, so he's like on a track or something? Is that the idea? Or
well, no, it's actually like it's a full on. It's like a Mario 64 clone, like Collectathon. But because he's on wheels, the terrain actually affects how he controls at times. Like going downhill, he moves faster. Like going uphill, he's slower. Like terrain, like really matters. It's a really impressive game for the time. You can see a lot of like the Sly Cooper like early like ideas there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that almost everything that Sucker Punch has made has been at least a lot of fun, if not an amazing game at the very least, right? So that alone makes me want to try that game. So so it's still on my collecting list. Now I know for sure it's one that I have to grab. Now that you say that, so you sold me.
Okay,
you sold an eBay purchase off some random person somewhere else. Okay, so you teased about collecting. I mean, that's a big thing. I personally, and I will tell this story probably in different parts as Remember 64 continues, but I personally had so many games as a kid. The Super Nintendo was always the console that stood out to me as my favorite of all time. I mean, it's really my favorite nostalgic console of all time, I would say. So I hung on to that. I have that console, I have my original everything. It all still works. I don't have that many cartridges still, but for some reason, even though I had a really deep attachment and always loved the N64, it's nowhere to be seen. It's nowhere. So I wanted to start this podcast. I wanted to start this adventure in collecting and playing these games and talking to people about them. But now I've had to start from scratch. So I found a good deal on the console itself and a couple of controllers, but the games are really sometimes tough to find. And I know the 64 is not the only one that is in that boat. But you have a lot more experience, longer than just a few months or 6 months like myself of collecting. Let's talk about your collecting story overall, and then we'll touch on some of the, Nintendo 64 and Nintendo collectibles that you've sort of had along the way. How did you start? Why did you start? And how's it been going?
Okay, so it's actually funny because we're actually about to record a podcast going into this pretty soon. But so the way I always put it was like back in the day, like as a kid, I was one of those kids who would never like get rid of a game. Like even if I disliked it, I'd never trade it in. Or I got it as a gift, and that was a game that I wasn't interested. I just never would trade them in. I'd always hold on to everything.
You're secretly so smart.
See, I am, but at the same time, I tossed out all those Game Boy Advance boxes, which I'm still kicking myself for.
Yeah, that's the other thing is the boxes are just I don't know. I've talked to a couple people over the last couple years about just sort of collecting and old games and stuff, and those seem to be the first things to go. Whether you have the game or not. I mean, how many people have like a complete set of stuff? So, anyways, continue.
So that was back in because I was born in the mid 90s, so kind of collected on and on. I had all the PlayStations, I had all the Game Boys, come around. So I'm in high school now, around 2009. YouTube is starting to become like a big thing, and I discovered a channel called Classic Game Room, and I kind of go on a Classic Game Room binge. And one episode that Drew like stuck to me, like for I don't know the reason why, like it just something about it was his review of the Dreamcast.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I was like just enamored by the Dreamcast, like because it's funny because it was around technically when I was alive, like I didn't miss it.
Yeah,
but I never noticed it, probably because I was a PS2 kid and the PS2 murdered it into the ground.
Yeah.
But
and at this point, sadly, the Dreamcast didn't last as long as it probably should have. But anyway.
No. But so I was actually one of those kids who didn't even realize Sega made consoles for the longest time. Like I always thought they were a third-party company. So
that shows our age difference right there. Is that it's just
which is funny because I was alive during the Saturn and Dreamcast era. I was in like that world where all I knew about gaming was PlayStation, Nintendo 64.
Yeah, well, which is fair enough because that was that time for you, right? Like for me, the PlayStation 2, the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, the 64 covered over the Saturn. Like the Saturn almost didn't exist when it was out for me. And I know that it didn't sell great and all that, but the Dreamcast, like one friend had it, like it makes sense. It tracks to me that Sega at that age, Sega would not be front of mind as a console maker.
So anyways, that the Dreamcast episode, it just like enamored me. So immediately at this point, I'm just browsing like eBay, not eBay. It was probably Amazon at the time, and I just was curious. I just typed in Sega Dreamcast, and I saw one boxed for $50, like brand new, never been open, and I was like. They're that cheap? So my birthday was coming up, and I was just kind of like, "Hey, Mom, how about this?" And she went above and beyond because she also got me Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, plus a VMU and an extra controller.
Solid games too.
And I was like,
"Go, Mom!"
I know, right? And I was like, "Okay." So I got the Dreamcast and like immediately like I picked the thing up, and I'm like just like messing with the menu because it was like a kid opening like a brand new toy for the first time, and you're like, "What is all like?" This was the first time I ever experienced like nostalgia, even though I have had zero nostalgia for the thing. And I was just like, something about it was just cool because it was so different from like everything else at the time.
I mean, it's a cool looking console and controller when you really look at it, for sure.
And Sonic Adventure, well, I won't say it's aged well by any means. It's still a really fun game to play. And immediately after that, it kind of something just clicked where I was kind of like, I really like old video games. I'm going to take a deep dive into Wikipedia and start learning about this shit. So then from there, I learned about the Saturn, and then I learned about the Genesis. And then I started looking into Nintendo stuff because really my Nintendo knowledge kind of started at the N64. We had a hand-me-down NES, so we had some knowledge there. But other than that, I didn't know much.
Right, and unless you're cycling through a bunch of games, you're going to play with the new toy. You're going to play with the Dreamcast. I mean, like, come on. You're going to play with your PlayStation 2. Why wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. So I'm go after that, then I'm like hunting Dreamcast games because it's like I need more to play on this. So
sure.
And at that time, they weren't cheap, but they weren't expensive either. Right. They were kind of in that middle ground. So I immediately went for the cheaper ones. Like I immediately tracked down like Choo Choo Rocket, Jet Grind Radio, Daytona
Jet
USA,
Grind Radio, yes,
Crazy Taxi, like all like the classics, and then Shenmue because at the time Shenmue was like $12, like no one cared. And then after that, then I was immediately then I discovered eBay for the first time, and I was following eBay and I saw a Genesis for sale with all the classic Sonic games, like plus a bunch of other random games, 2 controllers, and everything it needed to play. And the starting bid was 99 cents. And I was like, okay. And this was my first experience with a bid war because the thing ended up going up to like $40, I think, by the time. And I was like monitoring this like nonstop, like because I wanted that Genesis.
That is insane.
I ended up winning it too, which was great.
Amazing. That's awesome.
And then this is where the N64 comes in because at this point now I'm starting to get at least some, not a lot of income, but a small amount of income because. So I went to a vocational school, so I was able to go on co-op my senior year, and I was making a small amount of, like, a decent, like, for a kid still in high school, it was a decent amount of money. So I immediately, the first thing I do is I look up the N64. And at the time, they weren't really that expensive. Like,
I think when these new consoles came out, it doesn't surprise me. Like the next one comes out, GameCube comes out at that next, and I mean everyone's going to look for GameCube, everyone's going to look for the PS2, everyone's going to look for the next hot thing. So just throw out the old ones or get rid of them. You know what I mean? Like garage sale everything. Like,
well, I always say like
that's probably where my stuff went. So
yeah, well, I always say collecting kind of goes in cycles. Right now, it's a little weird because everything's kind of expensive, but at the time, that was when like Super Nintendo and original Nintendo were like the hottest thing on the market. Like that's what everyone was nostalgic for.
I guess you hit that 20-year mark. Maybe that's that 25-year mark seems like the hot spot, right? Which is exactly what I'm doing with this show, right? It's 25 years later, and like you just said, stuff is pretty damn expensive, pretty consistent.
Yeah. So I only had enough money at the time for the system itself. So I finally get the system. It comes in, it's like perfect condition. Claimed it worked, but I had no way of testing it at the time because I didn't have a game, and I wouldn't get a game for it for another 2 months because I didn't have the money at the time.
You just sleep with it under your pillow, saying, "Don't worry, I'll keep you safe."
Well, no, I had it on the rack with all the other consoles I'd gotten by this point because I was starting to get a collection of them, and it sat there plugged in. Like I'd turn it on every now and be like, "Hey, the light works," but I wouldn't be able to play it. And then I finally actually bought Star Fox 64.
There it is. Nice.
And after that, then I kind of started slowly building my N64 collection because at the time it was cheap, but cartridges are just inherently more expensive than discs. And I kind of started building a smaller collection there. And then my favorite thing after that was the GameCube. Because the GameCube this was right at the point where the GameCube was discontinued. Yeah. And people were just tossing them.
Yeah.
So
it's like the Dreamcast. It was more short-lived than a lot of other consoles.
Oh yeah. And it sold particularly poorly when you actually look at it in the grand scheme of things. But I went to so this is one of my favorite collecting stories ever. I go to GameStop and I'm like, "Do you guys have any GameCubes?" And they were sold out. They had one that they were going to toss because it was supposedly broken. And I was like, I literally looked at the employee, I'm like, "I'll give you $5 for that." So I paid $5 for it. And then I bought a copy of Smash Brothers Melee for $50 because that's how much Melee was at the time.
Yeah.
And then I go home.
That's like ticket price. That's
yep.
That's flat price right there. Yeah.
And then I go home and I'm like, I spent $5. I got a 50-50 shot. This thing works. So I plug it in, start it up, boots right up. I was like, I'm just sitting like, what, did they not plug it in all the way or something?
Faulty wire? Like what?
Maybe.
Or the outlet, just the outlet itself wasn't working in the store?
Maybe. Or it wasn't plugged in right or something. Either way, I was like...
You won.
I'm not going to say anything.
No way.
There's just something hilarious about... I paid $50 for Melee and $5 for the GameCube.
That's hilarious. I guess that's part of what it is a lot of people, now it's really hard to do because everyone knows what things are priced at. You can look online all you want, but to find like a huge deal or something. So how do you feel like things have progressed? I mean, again, we've already just said that things are more expensive and everything, but from this experience, like from that N64 GameCube time to now, do you feel like is it a more like hostile environment, or is it just like people are grabbing it up and the demand is just higher than it used to be?
So it's a bit of both. Like there is honest collectors out there who just want to collect the games to play them, or in some cases for preservation, because that's a new like hot topic with gaming collecting. I'm kind of in the middle of that. I only buy games I actually want to play, but I also have I kind of have like that urge to like keep them just like to preserve their like memory, because especially with disc games, I think disc rot is a bit overblown and blown out of proportion compared to how some people act like it's the end of the world. But it's gonna happen at some point. Like there's no way these things are gonna last forever.
Like everyone thought, at least at the time, definitely not later, but at the time it was like, oh, VHS, it's like such a great technology. And then you realize that 7 years later, that tape starts basically withering away, even if you don't touch it. So at some point, something's going to happen. So the preservation of it. So do you do anything in particular? Like, I know you have a lot of disc games. Like, you have a really huge nostalgia and experience with PlayStation. Is there anything in particular that you do? Do you wrap anything up? Do you put things in cases? Do you just like, how do you, is it just preservation as I have it and I want to keep it, I want to keep it in good condition, or
keep it in good condition?
Yeah.
So I don't like have like safe deposit boxes, and I don't like put them in. I'm not a fan of grading. I know it's a controversial topic. I'm going to leave it at that. But I just do like the basics. Like, I have my Saturn collection over here. It's out of the sunlight. Definitely keep them out of direct sunlight. Keep them elevated, like not like piled on top of each other. Like they're in like proper like bookshelves, or like, if you can see my PlayStation collections all right there.
Yeah, like, people can't see it on listening to the episode, but you have a whole ton of discs from PlayStation, and I assume some Dreamcast and all that. Like, there's
Dreamcast is right here.
Yeah, so that you have quite a bit there, and I guess that's kind of the advantage to the disc too. Is it comes with the box.
Yep.
Right? Like, for me, I'm looking for these N64 games, not all of them in boxes, because it's not realistic and it's just way too expensive. But if I wanted to find, and I am searching for some particular games that I really love, to get it with the box and everything, it's just a whole other thing. And I just don't know what to do. Do I go back to 2008 and 9 when you were doing it? I guess that's the only way, right?
That's even then, like, I started 2009 and I don't actually own a boxed N64 game. That's like the one console I don't have an actual like boxed representation. The closest thing I have is this reproduction of Conquer. Like,
one of like the plastic ones. Yeah.
The case itself.
Yeah.
The card is legit.
Is nice, which is already a hard one to find. It is 100% a game that I have very, very little experience with as well. And even less than when I was talking about F-Zero before. And I want to play that game so bad.
Thankfully, like, God bless Microsoft for making the Rare replay.
Yes, that's another thing, right? Well, then the Banjo-Kazooie games are on there. There's a whole lot of older Rare ones.
That's honestly, like, just off topic, 1 second real quick. Out of all this, the whole Nintendo Microsoft sort of like friendliness, that's like the one game I'm like, can we please put that on Switch?
Yeah,
like anything. Like, I just like that out of anything.
Well, Banjo-Kazooie is on like the N64 expansion pass thing.
I did notice that. I saw that.
Yeah, recently. But you gotta shell out the coin for
fingers crossed. You never know.
Yeah, exactly, right. So is there any advice? I'm saying this somewhat sarcastically. I'm asking for a friend. Is there any advice to collecting in the current age that you have? It doesn't have to be specific to the 64, but anything in particular. Are you looking in certain places at certain times for certain signals? What are you seeing sort of in the last little while?
So they definitely go through trends. Like, there's definitely certain systems that are more popular than others right now. Mm-hmm. Like Sega CD, Sega Saturn, forget about it. Like, good luck. Like, that's all I can say there.
So they're really hot right now.
They've always been, like, even back in the day. Like, the most expensive game I've ever bought is Panzer Dragoon Saga for the Saturn, and that was $500.
Wow.
Now it's like $1,000. So
wow. So it's worked out for you.
I've gotten very lucky. Okay. Like, one of my luckier finds was I was visiting Alex, and we went to this random like retro game store we just found, and they had a copy of Popful Mail for the Sega CD.
Oh, I've heard of that. I have not played that, but I do know of it.
It's a very good like side-scrolling action RPG.
Okay, but
it's one of those really rare Sega CD games because it was like one of the Working Designs published ones.
I think that's why I know of it, is because I know that it's rare, but I have no experience with it whatsoever. Yeah.
At the time, it was going for like $400, and the store was selling it for $200. And I was like, I didn't even have the money for it, but I was like, I'm going to take the hit because I'll never see this again.
Right.
Like, sometimes my advice is like, I don't want to promote this because it's not healthy, but like sometimes you got to take a risk.
I mean, but I guess that's part of what it is, right? I mean, like collecting of any kind, there is some risk involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're collecting for the sake of it because you enjoy it, which is I think what you and I are talking about here, like
Yes,
that's different. We're not looking to sure if you really needed to get that $200 game and now it's worth $600 or $700 and you sold it, great. You literally got something out of it, but
mm-hmm.
you're collecting it for the joy of collecting it. And I guess
exactly.
If you want to take the hit, you can take the hit. Obviously, you got to be responsible with your money, but at the same time, if you enjoy it, it's a hobby, right? Just like just playing games in general. A game costs anywhere between $40 to $100 nowadays for a new one. So, is there a difference? Depends on where your interests lie, I guess.
No, I do want to disclaim when I say I didn't have the money. It was more like I had taken a amount of money because we were planning on going like retro game store hunting, like hopping around. Well, I blew my entire what I had brought in that one trip, and I was
one trip.
Well, I'm like, I guess that plan's out the window.
Well,
or else we're
one-stop shop.
Yep. Or else we're not going to have any money to actually do not gaming things. So.
Oh yeah, there's that whole like food and water thing that apparently is important. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's like I will say like with like certain systems like Saturn, Sega CD, even Dreamcast is getting pretty bad now. I wouldn't even bother. Dreamcast maybe. Then there's other systems like the Genesis is weird because it's like some Genesis games are stupidly expensive, but then others like people just don't care. The original Xbox, nobody cares about it right now.
I love that thing. I still have mine. It's great.
Diehard PlayStation 2 fan. I've started collecting original Xbox games because I've been playing them, and they're all better on the original Xbox. And I hate to admit it, but it's true. And nobody cares about them, so I'm like, okay, I can get all of these for like nothing.
Yeah, I still have that whatever 20-pound clunker that it is, and all my original stuff for it too. I love that system. I had such a great time with it.
I'm enjoying it now.
That's
now
awesome.
That I've experienced it. But then, so the biggest ones right now, like that, are like the hottest systems though, because they go through cycles. And the current cycle is N64, ironically, and GameCube. GameCube is absurd right now.
Really? Okay, interesting.
So I've had this theory with like a couple close friends, like the generation of kids who like you kind of alluded to this earlier. The generation of kids who grew up with GameCube, they're all adults now.
Yeah, and
they have some disposable income, and they all want their stuff back that they don't have anymore. So they're going,
I want my stuff back.
Yeah. So they're all going crazy to get all these GameCube stuff. And keep in mind, GameCube stuff isn't in high supply as it is because it wasn't a particularly good, well-selling console. This is what a lot of people miss with the GameCube, because the GameCube has an extremely dedicated fan base, but it still was the third selling console of that generation. And the gap between first and second wasn't even close.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that generation was a runoff. 100%.
Oh yeah, that was like the definition of curb stomp.
Yeah. Console curb stomp.
So Sony just like Microsoft only survived because of Halo.
Oh yeah, there's Halo and a couple titles, and that's pretty much it.
And
yeah, you're right.
Halo and the early Xbox Live.
Yes.
Nintendo had its dedicated fan base, but even that wasn't like enough because they were still the kiddie console.
It got smushed for sure. Unfortunately, right? It's sad. So those are sort of like the tough ones to get at now. So lucky me, here I come right into the fray, kind of thing. So
yeah, unfortunately, you did want to say like how to like some advice. My advice honestly is you got to pick and choose your battles with like what you're going for. So I've kind of I made a tweet about this like a few days ago. I've kind of like hit like a wall in a sense with where I'm collecting right now. I kind of have pretty much everything I can get reasonably. Like there's a few small collections that I really want to complete, but I just cannot justify the price right now. So to compensate for that, I've started kind of like going for more niche things. Like my first video game I ever played, like that got me into gaming, was actually a puzzle game called Clax on the Game Boy Color.
I don't know if I've heard of that.
So it's actually this is the said game.
Oh wow, I have not seen that before. Okay.
So this isn't my original copy. I bought this because it was incredibly cheap, $5, just to have a physical full box copy of my first
Wow,
video game
full
ever.
box copy. Game Boy Color. There it is.
Yep. But one of my goals is because I'm being realistic here. Like, this stuff's expensive, and I want to keep game collecting is an addiction, and to satiate that, I'm trying to collect every version of Clax I can find.
Wow, look at that. There's
what's-
a Sega version too.
This is the Sega Master System version. Believe it or not, this is actually a European copy because this game never came out over here in America.
Nice.
We instead got the Game Gear version, which I also have.
Nice. Yeah, Game
So-
Gear, also something that a lot of people may have forgotten about too.
Mm-hmm. And then like another like niche collection I've started is I'm a big like auto racing fan. Like I grew up like watching NASCAR and stuff, so I'm trying to collect every single NASCAR game I can find.
Wow, cool.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of them, but they're worthless. So it's like they're so easy to find. They're so
Well, that's
easy.
another thing. Yeah, like a lot of the sports related games, I mean, they're annual editions, right? So there's so many of them that they don't hold value, but really you're collecting it for the fun of collecting it, right? So so it doesn't matter if it costs $4 or this one was 14 and the other one was 10. Like, who cares? It's great. Now you have that collection. So you're saying like pick a focus, right? Is kind of what it is, right? Is part of it.
Like I've seen online a lot of people, they're like, you need to get the rarest things possible, and you have to go for like the most insane, like super high value, like popular games. I'm always like, that's the problem I see with game collecting now, is people are jumping into it thinking like, you need every Mario game, every imaginable, like these like super rare RPGs, every Final Fantasy. I'm always like, calm down a little. Like, if you want to play a lot of these games, if you want to play them, there are very easy ways to find them on other platforms. If it's for the sake of collecting, I mean,
That's a whole other thing. Yeah.
slow down. You don't need them all at once. Like, slow down a little.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing too. You got to pace yourself a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And like that's got to be
that's-
part of it.
That's the major key.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed, like, in particular now, like, I see, like, every week it's always kind of like, hey, I found this. What's it worth? It's like, that's not the point. Like,
Yeah.
if you're buying
I guess the what's it's worth is if you're working within your budget and you need to sort of say like, okay, well, I'm not, you go to a store and let's say, they're trying to turn a profit too. It's a store. They need to sort of they need to pay their employees and pay their rent. So they're going to charge $15 more for that particular game, let's say. Okay, well, it's $15. You're willing to take the cut of the 15 to have that game that you enjoy. Great, no problem. Now, if you're going to go and pay $150 extra just because you feel like it's there, I got to get it. Do your research, I guess, is part of it too, right? I mean, it's a little bit of it.
another thing I've found is importing. I've gotten into the import scene recently because one of actually the best consoles to import for is the Sega Saturn. Because for some reason, 9 out of 10 times, the Japanese version of any Saturn game is cheaper than the American version.
Really interesting.
Well, it's likely also mainly because this is a Japanese Saturn game. It's in a jewel case, tiny. And this is an American Saturn game.
The giant case.
Giant cases that are extremely fragile.
Oh, are they really? Okay.
Yeah, like they're finding them in decent. Like that one's actually in pretty good shape, but some of them there's like big cracks down the center.
Well, sure. You could crack a regular CD case
Oh, yeah.
pretty easily. So
The thing is, getting replacement shells for these is very easy. Getting
Yeah.
replacements for those is expensive, and a lot of times the replacements ones aren't even that great quality, and they break anyways.
yeah. I've seen stuff like that with, even reproductions of boxes for N64 and Super Nintendo. Like that's just, it's fine to do that, but sometimes you get that replacement and it's not the same. There's
No.
something about it, right? Like
Yeah,
you can
Then-
do it. It's an option.
And then like sometimes you'll get like something where it's like it's in such rough shape, but you want to save it from being even worse. Like here's my copy of Sonic 3D Blast, and this thing has seen some hell.
Literally taped together.
So this is me after I attempted to fix it. It was flat when I got it. But the import scene is like really interesting because like I'm actually really curious about getting into the N64 import scene because I believe the N64 isn't actually region locked. You have to modify the back of the cartridges. That's how.
I think you do. Yeah, I think that's.
I believe
what it
it's
is.
there's these tabs on the back here.
Yeah.
The Japanese ones don't have these tabs, so all you have to do is buy like a Madden or something and just take the back off. And
I think something about maybe the European ones are slightly different too, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
I haven't looked too deep into it, but
that's another thing that I'm really fascinated. I don't know what that word was. Fascinated by is how like region locks are implemented. Like, because some are real easy to crack. Like the Sega Saturn Action Replay, it's no longer a thing.
Oh, okay.
Like that one is super easy. Like the Action Replay for the Saturn is almost like required if you're a Saturn owner. The PlayStation's a bit tougher because I used this thing for my PlayStation called the Goldfinger. It only works on the original PlayStation models that have that port on the back.
There's a certain like set of barcodes or serial numbers or something like that have it, right?
Yeah, it's like the first couple models. It's called the parallel port. It was a redundant port that Sony never used, and most of these Game Shark, Action Replay, all these companies used it for their cheat devices, and that's why Sony got rid of it to stop that. And then they started going in through the memory card slot.
Right.
But
they found a way.
Yeah. But the Goldfinger plugs into that. And the way the Goldfinger works is you have to jam down. So there's a little like button inside the disc tray that it's basically just the sensor that detects that the tray's closed so the disc will start spinning.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You're supposed to like jam it down with a spring. I just shoved some tape in there and like shoved it down. And what you do is you start the game with like an American disc. Not every game works. You have to like kind of pick and choose. Some do, some don't. You start it up with an American game. Once it stops spinning, you take it out and you switch it with the import game. Close it, and then if it works, then it will start playing. So you can get it right. Way.
That's crazy.
It's a little unorthodox, but it's pretty cool. It's so I can play like.
But it works.
So I can play like. I have a small collection of imported PlayStation 1 games.
That's cool. Yeah, the imports. I don't know if I'll get to the imports eventually, but it'd be cool to get some of the games that I really enjoy for the 64.
I want to get actually to talk back to N64. Sin and Punishment. That's one I really want to.
Oh yeah, I have. I've seen lots about that. That looks interesting. That could be cool.
Well, they put it on that the Switch thing, so it's there if you really want to play it. But that's like what's cool about that one is it's fully translated. It never came out over here.
Oh, it's translated. I didn't realize that. Oh, okay, interesting. And it just didn't get here. Like, come on. I
think it was supposed to. I think it got like canceled towards the end because there's also like a bunch of like Japan only N64 games that just look interesting. Like the original Animal Crossing came out on it first.
Yes.
Animal Forest, I think it was called at the time. There's like a bunch of like weird ones. I'd have to like do some research on it, but
yeah, that's the other thing too, right? So all the sort of collecting, I mean, you sort of find, like you said, you find your focus. Certain things are higher at certain times, but it's hard to know. You know, I want to jump into the N64, but I'm at the hot time because, like you said, I'm the old guy now that wants all his toys back.
Yeah.
So
N64 is not as bad as GameCube, but it's still kind of
it's up there. I
mean, everything's bad now. Like even PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 is pretty bad. No one cares about Xbox, but
yeah, somehow, you know what? It will in a couple years. Maybe it'll hit its stride because it'll be at that 25-year mark in 2026. I guess it would be. So it's getting there. It's almost there. You're getting lucky and you're beating the rush. I think you might have a good system going here.
I mean. I'm always like whenever I see like I like to mess around on the Reddit board game collecting, and they're really melodramatic there sometimes. But occasionally you'll get like a question where like someone will ask, "What's your luckiest gaming find?" And I'm like, I never half the time I don't believe half the people there.
Right, that's a whole other thing, yeah.
And I don't ever want to share because I feel like I'm going to get threatened half the time.
Where do you live? They're going to find you.
Because I post like collection pictures there every now and then, and occasionally like I'll post like something like I posted my Sonic collection because I have most of the Sonic games, and this was in there, and everybody. So it's for people who don't know, it's a boxed copy of Knuckles Chaotix for the 38-2X. This is a very rare game, especially boxed, and this isn't even like a really good copy. Like, it's in pretty rough shape.
You still got the box though.
I found it at a garage sale for $5.
Yes.
Just sitting there. I walked. I didn't even have a 32X at the time. I just was walking by and I saw it. I'm like, that's a 32X game in a box. And I'm like, I went up to the lady and I was expecting like a couple like in the double digits anyways. And she's like, oh, $5. I'm like, okay, thanks.
Oh, garage sales, man. Oh.
See, the problem with garage sales is now they all know what they're selling. So
yeah, you have to get lucky with that too. So yeah. All right. Well, we're going to continue following your journey in collecting. Where I know where to find you, but if anyone hasn't found you yet, where can they follow your stuff, your own collecting, your podcast, all of that good stuff?
Okay, so my personal blog, like where I'm probably most well known for, is Instagram. It's on Instagram. It's at the Barber Who Games, no spaces.
Okay.
You can find me. My pictures say like Bitmoji, and it's got like a green kind of border thing going. The podcast is the Gaming and Collecting Podcast. That is also on. It's on pretty much every major podcasting platform. We make it on Anchor, and we have a Instagram, a Twitter, Good Pods, like pretty much every social media platform. I actually have a link tree, like that's located on my Instagram that leads to everything.
Yeah, we got the same thing going. I love. It's a great way to sort of like consolidate all your stuff.
Yeah, and you can like fully customize it and like
that's cool.
I just found out you can put. Really I found out you can put little pictures next to all your links. Like, of like
what? I've discovered something new. I didn't know that.
Look at mine next time, and you'll see. Like, I have like little image pictures on each individual link. Like, it's
nice.
Custom. You can do it on the Linktree website. I found out.
All right, we'll do then. That's awesome. Okay, well, Bill, thanks for coming on, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, no problem.
We learned some stuff. We talked about nerdy things. What else can we ask for, right? So that's about it. We'll keep track of your stuff. Anyone who wants to find him, he just laid everything out there. So find him on social media and on podcast platforms. Thank you so much to Bill, and thank you everyone for joining us for our discussion. As I mentioned in level 1 of the podcast, I really want Remember 64 to be entertaining, educational, and above all, fun. I want to build a community around that. And I don't want to do this on my own. I want to hear from you. I want the community to let me know what games you loved, the good times you had with the Nintendo 64, and what you want to hear and see me talk about in future episodes. I've also launched a Patreon page, multiple levels and tiers that you can be a part of with that. Just take a look at it. Any tier will get you some really cool extra content. You can also catch me and email me at remember64show@gmail.com. Well, you'll also be able to find lots of videos, photos, and fun collecting shenanigans on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. All of those are also under at Remember64Show. Until next time, stay pixelated, my friends.